Get into it. Sold Not For Sale podcast. Coach Colin here. We got Joe Rogan talking to Calle and Calle Means. If you don't know who those two are, when you listen to this clip, you are going to become familiar. And I think you're going to become fans. This guy was a never Trumper, his sister as well. And when they saw Trump actually taking very serious the health issues that are plaguing Americans nationwide, they started to change their tune. They actually started connecting him to RFK. They're responsible for that connection. So I want you guys to hear this never Trumper make a case as to why we need Trump more than ever right now. Let's get right into it. And after that, I'm going to show you a clip of RFK actually making a very interesting announcement about this gentleman on the screen and his sister who's off screen. Let's get into it.
Health and healthcare listening to guests on your show, then I think Casey's probably learned at Stanford Med School. So it's like people left to their own devices are flocking to this, and we need to make a statement with our politics. This is unfortunately a political issue.
So you were one of the people that helped sort of broker the deal with RFK and Trump and bring the two of those together. Tell me how that got started. Tell me how that worked out.
Yeah, I mean, when I think about that story, I literally think about 2021. Our mom abruptly dying of pancreatic cancer. She was taking a hike, got a pain in her stomach, got a text the next day after getting a scan saying she has stage 4 pancreatic cancer. We rushed to her side. She died 12 days later, just totally surprisingly. And Casey and I, on her gravesite, literally hugged each other and said, we want to write a book and we want to make this and evangelize this, inspired by you and others. We want to evangelize this and add the chorus to prevent what's happening, because so many Americans are on this pharmaceutical treadmill, and then the cancer is random. It's not random. Like all these warning signs that were missed with my mom, her prediabetes, her high cholesterol, her high blood pressure, those were pilled, not seen as gifts to get to the root cause. And then she was chopped down by cancer. This is happening to everyone. So we want to evangelize that. And we've been on the path as best we can with companies and evangelizing. And through these amazing podcasts like Tucker, we got connected with people. So got to know RFK, got to know Democrats, and got to know the Trump campaign. And in the past year, I will say this, the Trump campaign has been extremely interested in the policy of why kids are getting so sick. And if you go back a year ago, President Trump actually at rallies to loud applause has been talking very similar points to RFK. So we got to know RFK. Sitting, watching the first assassination attempt, I had like a spiritual, what I can call it, kind of out-of-body experience. And I felt the need to call Robert. I think what he has done is historic. The fact that he was getting up to 20% of the vote, highlighting this issue, tapping in, I think, to this consciousness and tapping into this, to this stream that you're tapping into, I think it really showed something. And I had this vision for a year. Actually, it sounds very woo-woo, but I was in a sweat tent with him in Austin at a campaign event 6 months before, and I just had this strong vision of him standing with Trump, and how what RFK represents is actually what Trump represents, and actually what almost every American's feeling, which is this frustration and this rigged thing and this thing that doesn't quite feel right, that you can't quite put your finger on. And it was so clear to me that how RFK talks about health personifies this overall kind of institutional capture. It makes it real for people in a really visceral way because it's clearly impacting their kids. So that was all the context. Picked up the phone, called him, and just urged him, as a supporter, as a lowly supporter, to consider maybe this is the time, as President Trump put his fist up, as with all this momentum. There's rare moments in history where the deck can change. And I really felt, and he felt, like this could be a realignment of American politics, because that moment felt very heavy after the assassination. So we went back and forth, and he asked to, he's like, let me talk to him. So I worked with Tucker, and we connected them that night. And here's the key point I want to make from my small vantage point here. They had weeks of conversations, and there was not a discussion of polling. There was not a discussion of the horse race and how this would impact the race. These were tear-filled conversations about why kids are getting so diabetic, about why we have such obese children in the United States, about why we have a fertility crisis. Like, this was a true connection of these two men, and a true deep bond, which I think you're seeing out there on the campaign trail, that this transcends politics, and Trump wants this to be a generational issue for him. And I just want to say something. I think we're at a big moment here. We're debating trivia. Like, I think the two most existential issues are nuclear war or what's happening to our health. And whatever you think, and I used to be a never Trumper, watching him care about this issue, watching what's happening with the RFK, watching what's happening of how that's resonating with voters, seeing smally, from my small vantage point inside, there is tremendous connection of these two men and moral clarity of seeing what's happening. And my question is this, and to anyone kind of considering voting in this election, Trump is going to say stupid. He is Trump. We know who he is. There's two important questions to ask. Who sees this corruption and institutional capture that's going to destroy our country, I think, to an existential level? And who is willing to suffer that blowback? Who is willing to go up against these military-industrial complex, the healthcare industrial complex, the education industrial complex that's making us a non-competitive? Like, they are ready. Who is going to appoint? This is a question I have. Who do we believe is going to appoint people like RFK, people like Elon Musk, to stir stuff up? Who is going to do that? Like, that to me is the foundational question. And I do consider this the most important election of my lifetime, watching these two men, because it is so genuine. And there is like a genuine desire to truly transform, to see our broken corruption and institutions for what it is. And really, truly, I think prevent nuclear war and dramatically reverse our health crisis. Trump has said that his one big mistake last time was personnel, was that the pharma and the ag slithered in and gave him the list of names. Everybody should ask, do you think RFK is going to have an influence on those names based on what Trump has said? And I think he is. And I think people like Elon are going to be involved. I think there's this coalition of people that are coming together, and Trump's going to put in power and listen to. And this is a bipartisan issue. And no matter what happens, we have to solve this issue. But I will say this so clearly with the most conviction I can. We will be on the verge, I think, of a health population collapse, societally destabilizing event, unless true executive leadership sees this corruption and this issue for what it is and says we need a radical transformation in how we see agriculture and how we see health, our two largest industries. I think we have to have that. And every single member of Congress I meet with, including Democrats, say that in order for this issue to get done, we need a president to make this the priority, to talk, because that gives us air cover. And there could be transformational change if a president does that. So that's what I've seen from being in this. And I can tell you, President Trump has kept every promise to RFK and deeply cares about this issue.
It also seems like if this isn't done now, they will take steps to make sure it can never be done in the future.
Look what they're saying. Yeah. Look what they're saying about free speech.
Yeah.
Right now.
Yeah.
You probably covered this. It's just absolutely wild. The free speech comes from the rigging of the scientific research. Bill Gates said this week that we need immediate AI to scour the internet and take any misinformation out of the internet automatically on any format, any private webpage. This is wild. And he said, because the second that virus spreads in people's minds, the damage is done. So his number one use case for AI is to scour the internet and remove any misinformation from the internet. That is because the largest and fastest growing industry in the country has completely co-opted the most trusted parts of the country. There's no higher level than the NIH, than Harvard Med School. They know that. Harvard Med School is a subsidiary of pharma. Just demonstrably, the FDA is 75% funded by pharma. Like this isn't a conspiracy.
And there's a revolving door.
And you've got people like Scott Gottlieb. I think the people like Trump's talking about still thinking he's going to have power. This person that goes straight to Pfizer, and you got him and people like this. And I met with many of them. Okay, of course, this book is amazing. Good energy is amazing. The food, of course, we got to get kids healthier. But we got to work with pharma. We got to work with we got to work with all the stakeholders, insurance companies. We got to be incremental here. There's a war right now between incrementalists and radical change. We are living in a great time, but we have existential threats. And the question before everyone in this very important election is, do we need more incrementality? Or do we need a fundamental rethink of some of our major systems? I really think that's what's before us. And as Casey said, I think we're in a good period of history right now, certainly, but we're facing, I think, more existential threats that I really think we don't fully appreciate.
This is it's such a unique time, and it seems like without a person that's a total outsider like Trump, that's being so attacked. The fact that it's not just that they disagree with him, they attack him, is that they do it in unison. They do it so coordinated that you realize there is a machine behind this, and that they repeat the same talking points over and it's like they're given a script, and that there's no repercussions for lies. There's with the Russiagate stuff, with all the various different things that have been concocted to try to take him out. There's no one gets in trouble, and the same people are still disseminating the news. And more people, I think, are aware of that than ever before, and more people aware of this institutional capture.
And I think this is why the freedom of speech issue is actually so important and so existential, because the thing that gives me hope right now, like this all sounds dark, but we're both extremely optimistic. But if the ability to talk about these issues is taken away, that is when I would lose hope, right? Because the fact that, independent media is the most listened to form of media on planet Earth right now, that is a good thing. We can still discuss ideas and the light can connect across the globe. But when you start severing that ability, like there's a beautiful force happening right now. I think we all see it. Like people are waking up. People understand that there's a problem. Like we see this every day and, Twitter has its issues and whatnot, but like people are talking and connecting from around the world to try and figure out how to solve these issues that we all know on some level in the quietness of our heart are a really big deal, and that the time is now. And if that gets taken away, I worry about what's going to happen.
Wow. Yeah, these two are very, very passionate about this whole thing. And seemingly, at least to me, because I didn't know about these guys before, I felt like they came out of nowhere. I just saw them on Tucker Carlson's podcast. I was like, oh, this is going to be like one of those health podcasts. I'm like, oh, so whatever. And then I listened to it and I was like, holy, like the numbers that they have, it only makes sense that they be working with RFK. 100%. They're on the exact same page as RFK. And they're willing to take an approach opposite to who Joe Rogan had on the podcast before. What was his name? Brigham, that the bald guy, Ways to Well. Like great company. I've heard great things about it, but man, that guy was sitting back saying, I'm not against Kamala. I'm not for this person. I'm not for that person. I'm not political. I'm in the middle. He's being kind of wishy-washy about the whole thing. And these two did the exact opposite. They said, who is actually looking at wanting to have these answers found out and actually drain, because this is what they're talking about. They're talking about draining the swamp on a different level, right? The health level, the FDA, the NIH, like all of these things. Having people be able to have these government jobs and then jump over to pharma with all of that. Some of them still have clearance. It's crazy. It's ridiculous. And then jump back in and just go back and forth. Like that's the real swamp that they want to drain. So it's very interesting to hear this whole podcast. I'm going to jump over here real quick. RFK is actually talking about his role in the Trump administration and what he plans to do about exactly what Calle and Casey are talking about. So let's get into that.
And he's definitely in that category.
Of course I'm listening to it that fast, okay? I'm cramming every day. Let's go.
How do you envision your role in a Trump administration?
President Trump has asked me specifically to do two things. One, to help unravel the capture of the agencies by corrupt influence. In other words, to drain the swamp. And I had to say something about President Trump. President Trump has some extraordinary gifts, and one of them is that he has very, very good instincts. And that when he came out the first time, you remember, he was very against the lockdowns publicly. He was for hydroxychloroquine. He was for alternative medicines. He was against the mass. He was doing, but he was surrounded by bureaucrats who, and knowledgeable experts who, ultimately pushed back on those assumptions and got us into some policies that I think were really bad for our country. He's not going to do that again. And he wanted to end the wars. He said back then, we don't want to go into the Ukraine war. I'd rather make a deal than have a war. So I think that, and he's asked me to do that, and he's asked me to help him end the childhood disease, chronic disease epidemic, and make Americans healthy again.
And if given the power to do that, what'll you do?
You may, well, that's unclear because there's no, at this point, thank you. Like I said, I'm on the transition committee and there's no, we don't have, I don't have a post for myself that's picked out. I know that I'm going to be deeply involved in helping to choose the people who can run FDA and NIH and CDC in a way that restores public health rather than.
Can you imagine if you're at FDA or NIH and Bobby Kennedy all of a sudden? I mean, they must be dying. They must be dying.
But I'll bring in people to run those agencies like Calle Means, like Calle Means. And
You think they're going to, I mean, they have nightmares about that.
yeah, they should.
Yeah, and they should. Bobby Kennedy, thank you. May they have more nightmares. Larry Elder.
Man. So he actually wants to put these people who you're seeing on Joe Rogan, who have all of these stats, who are calling out the fact that this is not a political issue. This should be bipartisan. There's a swamp that needs to be drained. There's a revolving door that's happening right now. It's disgusting. It's hurting people. 6-year kids facing obesity. So many people just being pre-diabetic. It's becoming like a normal thing. It's way more normal to be overweight than it is to be in shape. It's rare to have a six-pack. Didn't used to be like that. You guys remember that video? There's a bunch of videos that are like going around. Not a bunch, but back in the day, what kids actually looked like in high school. I think it was like back in the 60s or something, maybe the 50s or something like that. Kids in high school in the 50s. I just put myself on a list by making that search, but I will and I'm not going to find the video. Actually, that's an example of the video, I guess. Bring it over here. Like those are high school people. Like just in shape. Just in really good shape. That doesn't happen anymore. And it's odd the way that used to be a very normal thing and now it's just not at all. It's very normal to just be obese. And that's the one thing that you see when you watch all of these videos of these. I can't find the video, but it's these young kids and they're just doing pull-ups and push-ups and they're climbing walls, climbing ropes, things that I could not even think of doing. And they're like 15, 16 years old. It's crazy. Absolutely crazy. Yeah, I can't find it. But that's what RFK wants to do with these people. And if he does that, if Trump allows him to do that, which Trump has already said, this is what I want RFK doing, it's going to be incredible for people. Because, let's try and find that hearing. The hearing that just took place. Maybe you don't. Congress hearing Fruit Loops. I'm putting myself on all sorts of lists, making these weird searches. Congress hearing Fruit Loops. There was a hearing that happened. Ah, there it is. Beautiful. Let me pull this up for you guys. 2 bags of. It's just real quick here. Pulls up 2 bags of Fruit Loops.
When we pulled out the 2 bags of Fruit Loops in front of the crowd, the whole audience gasped.
And this is the brightness of artificial food dye.
There were gasps.
Yeah.
It was a mic drop moment.
Yeah, the senator gasped.
Of
Like he could not believe the difference. I mean, the Fruit Loops in the U.S. looks like neon. And the Fruit Loops in Canada, which is colored with fruit juice, is a much more muted color. When we pulled out the 2 bags of Fruit Loops and
Yeah, it's wild. And there's a lot of that going on. A lot of dyes, a lot of things that just shouldn't be being used are being used. And they're not used in Canada, and they're not used in Europe, they're even not used in Africa. They're definitely not used in China, and it's just it has to change. It's just as bad as, AOC and all of these weird socialist Democrats who are like slowly, attacking free speech and attacking the Constitution. It's on that level of importance, you know? And I just love that this guy was a never Trumper and he is willing to just put that aside, because that's what people need to do. In this election, people need to do that. They need to put it aside. Like exactly what he said. Trump is going to say stuff on Twitter. It's okay. It's okay if a guy puts out a bunch of tweets that are mean or funny and then also tries to stop childhood obesity and then also make sure to end wars that are going on and then also make sure to drain the swamp in a way that he could not do before, that he's admittedly could not do before. It's okay. Like, make that compromise. I don't see how people can't make that. It's so weird, the arguments people have against Trump nowadays. Oh man, just somebody who just went to court and got found guilty. Nah, I can't. No. It's like, what? What are you talking about? Were you just screaming Black Lives Matter? Weren't you just like at a protest where a black guy got arrested and he's a felon? Why are you okay with him in that condition, not Donald Trump? Like, it's mind-boggling, the arguments people have. It's so crazy. I saw what he said. He said things about women, It's like, meanwhile, you got a friend named Rick who says the most wild stuff about. Sometimes you're the Rick inside the friend group saying wild stuff about women. Relax. Oh, the things he said. I've never said anything like that. I'm a good boy. Not me. It's crazy what people talk about. So the fact that this guy put it all aside, admittedly a never Trumper, just like JD Vance, and decided to really look at what his campaign is saying, what they're actually looking at. And now all of a sudden he's on board. And he's the one that brought him and his sister, admittedly. His sister didn't get to get a word in edgewise, really. Neither did Joe. He was going off for just now. But, they got RFK and Trump together. Like, just incredible. Incredible. He went from being a never Trumper to making sure one of the most important things, and some people can't see it now, this is going to be one of the most important things that we've seen in an election in American history. This is going to be in American history, because you have to think about how much the Kennedy family is in American history. And then all of a sudden, the one Kennedy who runs, drops out of the race, endorses Donald Trump. They start working together. It's a bipartisan effort. This has not been seen before. A never Trumper is his VP. He has another Democrat who left the Democratic Party in order to be. This has never been seen. More black voters than any other Republican candidate. This is just never happened before. This is going to be in history books. So make sure you register to vote. Get out there and vote. Please get out there and vote. Don't take it lightly. Don't think it's all in the bag. You got to make it too big to rig. And maybe soon we'll be seeing a guy like this running the NIH or the FDA. That would be something. I cannot wait. Elon fires half of the government employees, and then guys like this get put in position. That's what I'm hoping for. Anyways, guys, like, subscribe, turn on the notifications. Other than that, I'm out.